People don't care, nor do they have the time to follow what you are doing. Unless you really want to learn from this person, we can't just track everybody's everything. It is a little bit our own obligation to show someone what you're doing, tell someone what you're doing, and then take pride in some of the accomplishments.
If you're a residential real estate agent earning $200,000 a year and you want to grow your passive income, this show's for you. Learn the secrets other agents use and hear from experts in our field in order to guide you along your journey to investing in assets like apartment communities so that you can turn your commissions into cash flow. I'm Randall McLeod. Let's go, baby. All right. Welcome back. Welcome to Agents Building Cash Flow. It's the podcast for real estate professionals looking to grow your passive income. I'm your host, Randall McLeod, and I'm happy to have you here today. We have a very special guest joining us. His name is Evan Lyons, and he's with Encore Real Estate Investment Services. Guy is pretty impressive. He's got a great track record as a top producer in the commercial real estate space with a focus on the retail asset class. He's done over $200 million in sales, and he's really established himself as a leader in the industry. So what we talk about today is about his investments that he has done personally, how he wants to grow those investments, and some of the challenges he's had, I guess, early in his career about making a transition from being a broker and having the fiduciary responsibility into talking to his clients about being a principal or buying the deal from them. And I know that is a challenge for many agents. He has overcome that, and why he's overcome that, because it's a huge thing for all of us in the industry. So we talk about his holdings and some of the self-storage and single family and some other things he does. He's in ULI, and he's a contributor to some well-known publications within the industry. So a wealth of knowledge, a lot of information, a lot of things that we cover. So let's bring him on the show and get started so you can learn from the best. Here we go. Evan, awesome to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me today. We're looking forward to having this conversation and getting to know you a little bit better. So why don't you start off and just give us a quick background, like where you are in the real estate space right now, so that we give a baseline knowledge who Evan is.
Sure. Who am I? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I am a commercial real estate broker, investment sales with Encore Real Estate Investment Services, senior director there. I've been in the brokerage business for 12 years now. Straight out of college, cut my teeth out in Chicago at Marcus & Millichap, and moved back home after about 5 years there. Jumped over to Encore and have been there ever since, other than a deviation on the principal side. I jumped for about 15 months recently to manage a client who I've done a bunch of deals with, to manage their 3.5 million square foot portfolio throughout the Midwest. Wanted to get a taste on that side, which maybe we'll touch on, but deal junkie, couldn't stay away, couldn't shake the itch, jumped right back to brokerage, and Encore is the shop to be at. So here we are.
That's what I thought. I was going through just doing some research and looked like, hey, welcome back. So I didn't know what that transition was like on coming back. So it sounds like you just answered that on the principal side. Yeah. So what was your key takeaway from, I guess, working on the brokerage side, going to the principal side and coming back?
Oh gosh, there's the personal. In real estate, it was a box of principles to generally stick with in investing. Those principles can, of course, deviate person to person, but the common theme that I noticed with that ownership group, which is one man making very successful decisions for 30 years to get to this point, and just the way that he does not fall in love with the deal. If it meets its core criteria, boom, it's a strike. And that level of science behind it, I think, it's something that'll stick with me forever. On the personal side, I'm back in brokerage. So I learned, although I can certainly be successful in management and office arena, we did a lot there. It was great. Like I said, I'm a junkie for deals and finding them, serving clients' needs in that way. The entrepreneurial spirit type. So here we are.
Awesome. All right, let's jump in. So what are some key considerations that some real estate agents should take into account? Because you're in the retail, right? You're focused mainly in the retail space?
Correct. Sell other product types, but retail is going to be the bread and butter.
Got it. Okay. So I'm kind of curious, when agents, because I'm curious myself as well, I don't have any retail investments. I have talked to a number of real estate retail focused commercial guys recently. And so I'm getting to know that asset class a little bit more. But what are some key things that if I'm looking at an investment, I should be evaluating and looking at tenant mix, lease terms, that sort of thing?
Sure. Man, there is value in hard corner lighted intersections. I can tell you that. There is generally always a use for that dirt. And so if all things go poorly, a scrape and rebuild for a new tenant is a great exit. Getting into deals, look, this is no secret sauce across any of the product types. Money is made in the buy. You buy a deal, great. So how do we get there? Getting into deals that are on older leases. Some guy puts Sherwin-Williams in a nail salon and some restaurant that's been in there since 1990 and has just rolled via amendments a lease that was shaped by a typesetter. That type of deal is going to have very low rents. That's the reality. So to be able to get into a deal like that, maybe you keep some of those tenants, and because they're a sure thing, they have good business, they invest in their business, they're going to pay you your rent. That's a lot of the upside in multi-tenant deals, is bringing new tenants, new leases to market.
Okay, so when you're pricing those things out, are you pricing it based on current rents, or is somehow the pro forma based on, hey, I know you're going to increase the rents in 5 years, so this thing is going to trade a little bit higher than based on today's actual NOI number?
From the investment sale, me as broker standpoint, I don't like to price in pro forma. I mean, that's the meat for the next guy. Pricing itself may be, it's at a number dictated by ownership, myself, and then the marketplace. But when I bring a deal to market, I'm going to want to know what that market rent is, what someone can do there. Really, to me, that's the pitch in our conversations about a deal is, all right, you buy this today. Let me guide you through the path of this investment cycle. Here's where you end up in 3 years, probably. And I'll be ready to sell it for you at 3, or you hold it for more, get this new big rent increase in year 5, and then we reevaluate.
On the retail investment side, again, is your client base more institutional, or is it family office, or is it an individual? Like, what does that look like?
As a firm, it's across the board. We've sold 2 and 4 institutions, REITs all over the place. There's a big old one in our backyard here called Agree that many know. They've done a phenomenal job of growing their portfolio, 3Xing their portfolio over the last. We do a lot with those groups, but as a company, it's across the board. I mean, we will sell 4 and 2 first-time investors, private family offices, institutions. For me, the bulk of my investor pool is the mid-level shopping center owner, investor, someone that wants to see a carrot that has some tenant relationships for value add. Deals between $2 and $7 million bucks. I can make sense of those, underwrite them quickly. I know who's buying them. I know who's selling them. I know what tenants are going there. And those are the shadow anchored centers, the neighborhood shopping center. That's always been the core of the things that I like to work on in my client base. I've had to deviate because those types of shopping centers don't make a lot of sense at 7 caps. And that's where they were, 7.5 caps. That's where they were for the last 2.5 years. So I had a conversation with a good client just this morning. His name's Matt DeWood out of Toledo. And we said just that, hey, listen, we can start to be back. We haven't been able to buy a good deal in years. And, now we can have some conversations, not on all centers, but we can have some conversations with the word 10 cap. It's been a while.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what a deal looks like. So is it traditionally a 10 cap is when those centers start to make sense? 10, 11, 12?
It doesn't even have to be that bad. We can make sense of good deals at 8.5. 9.5. It's really a function of just how stabilized it is. So in that space, fully occupied, rents predominantly to market, and all the parking is used by the collective tenants, meaning we can't do anything with the outlots. That's a pretty stabilized deal. We're going to be low 8s all day. 2 tenants missing out of there, or 3 tenants on month-to-month leases, and a chunk of land over there where you could probably do a ground lease or some other deal. I can take that 8.5 to a 10, or that deal may just trade in the 9s, and then we're dancing close to 11. There's a lot that goes into what makes those deals work. A key there is the tenant relationship someone has. What's the confidence level that you, Mr. Buyer, or that you, armed with a couple good leasing brokers, tenant reps, things like that, can backfill? Because there's always a tenant expanding into markets where one is potentially exiting. That's the nice thing about our side of the business.
Yeah. So you mentioned the cap rates compressed a bit, and what's making them now expand? What's happening? Is it the interest rates?
Well, it's a collection of things, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that they aren't all moving in our space. So there are deals. We sold a 4.75 cap Burger King with roughly 10 years remaining this year. We sold sub 5 cap Walmart deals last week. So there's cash that isn't subservient to debt and interest rates. Now, it doesn't mean that slapping 4 and 5 cap deals in the market and they're all selling. No, and you have to work very hard to get those sold, and the buyer pool is this big instead of, I've said this 100 times this year, and leading into this year, I'll say it again because I'm happy that so far I feel right. This is a year of balance. There's opportunity if one works hard and aligns himself with good brokers, property managers, et cetera, or owners. There's opportunity to find a good deal. The good deals we haven't seen in a long time. The good deal that has death, divorce, partnership, breakup, lending issue, or stress on it, and that's why it's on the market. On the flip side, with the right broker, with the right marketing process, with the right tenant mix, this is a great year to sell at still what we'll call yesterday's pricing. I mean, at what is considered a premium and doesn't make sense relative to debt. So we're back to that. In my mind, 2018 healthy market debt was the interest rate was in the mid to high fives then anyway, and people could buy and could sell.
Normalizing the market a bit. Yeah, again, I'm focused on the multifamily space more so than any other asset class. So finally seeing some more deal flow coming out, seeing that some sellers are getting a little bit more realistic with their pricing.
We've seen more opportunity in multifamily as a predominantly retail and industrial investment sales group, A, digging up these deals, and B, can compete in that space. And some of it is just not really digging in. I mean, it's a shakeup. These investors who were traditionally single tenant industrial need to make sense of debt and need to use the money that's committed to them. So they're trying multi-tenant retail and multifamily. The New York multifamily groups that for 100 years were New York multifamily and you can't even compete with them are now looking only outside of New York. Well, what does that do for you and me? We can actually compete in the space in New York. So it's not that buyers, sure, there are some buyers completely on the sidelines. There's plenty of them, but there's also, for every one of those, there's another buyer that is in the mix, is active, but just isn't doing what they were traditionally. And so you take these buckets and we pour them into different cups, and it creates new opportunity, I think, for everybody, because someone's looking at it with fresh eyes. They have a fresh take. Someone is going to overpay because they're diving into a new space. Someone's going to affect a relationship in a different way and get that person to sell that otherwise wasn't going to. Again, I think it creates opportunity across all product types.
So talking about that, kind of curious, you're successful, you're in the commercial brokerage space, you're doing well, but you also have some self-storage and some single family. Is that accurate?
Self-storage, single family, and done some retail.
What advice, I guess, would you have for others looking to either expand into a different asset class or just to get started in investing? Not sure what your start in your journey was like. Maybe we can touch on that as well, but maybe some tips you have.
I've heard a million people say this on podcasts, and I think it rings very true. It does to me. Start early. I didn't start it early enough. It bugs me. You see some young guys that take every dollar and penny that they have initially and pow, and they got the cojones to go jump out there and do it and make something of it. That's amazing. Invested. I built this tiny little war chest over the years, ready to pounce. And what I found was during that really positive brokerage run, of course, pricing was increasing tremendously. And so being analytical, or at least maybe it's just knowing what a good deal is, I found myself underwriting myself out of contention or competition, and therefore ended up passing on a lot of deals. And I mean, there's definitely some that the ones that got away, the hindsight type deals, we can learn from them. We can't live in that space though.
I do want to ask you, what's the worst one that got away? Tell me a war story, man.
This is a little one. It has stuck with me forever.
It's been my psyche.
Yeah, it would have been really, it's the deal that I chase. It's not even sexy look. I categorize this product type as trash is cash. That is what I hunt for these. Let's call it 8 to 15,000 square foot shopping center that is dated and has a nail salon and a hair place and a freaking pawn shop, a pizza joint, and a something else, a tax office. You know, there's 20 of them along a 15-mile stretch. They were all built at some point. So we know those good client of mine. I love the man. I wasn't comfortable yet in my own skin to go, hey, listen, I know I'm your broker for this deal. I want to buy it. Right. Instead, it was very like, was hired. I got to respect the lines. I can't ask him this, I got to go make a market. We had, it was like 700 grand. We ended up structuring for a buyer, 5-year seller financing, interest only first 3, opportunity to the buyer's option to refinance that balloon with a predetermined spread that was small relative to I guess it backwards, but still would have been worthwhile. And 80% LTV. You had 4 tenants on month-to-month leases, which is scary to some people. They want lease commitment, but I like coming into an investment being able to make my own determination about, do I want to keep that tenant or not? Month to month or a tenant with no options gives a landlord the option to keep them, renegotiate them, lock them into something, or boot them. And I happen to know this landlord is impeccably, he puts a ton of emphasis on landlord to tenant relationship. So he's treated these people so well for 20 years that if you wanted them to stay, they were staying. And so rents were $3, $4, $5 under market for some of these spaces. You could install a drive-through on the end cap. I mean, there's just a whole bunch about it that hurts. At the end of the day, too, it was like a 22% cash on cash.
Do you classify these as like C, B? Like, what would you classify that one?
Yeah.
A lot of those shops that I see, it depends. The location may be like a B or C, but it's like the building itself.
C looking, B corridor. And so what you find is you could do nothing and lock some of those tenants in. Hey, listen, I know Mr. So-and-so is really great to you, but this is where rents are if you want to stay, blah, blah, blah. What do you need? A new HVAC unit? Okay, great. Let's do a 5-year lease. I'll put the HVAC in. Or you come in and do a full facade renovation, fresh parking lot, slap a nice flagpole up there. And now perhaps you're marketing to a very different tenant mix. People want to see in a corridor of 20 of those older shopping centers. It's not too difficult to differentiate and show, hey, I'm a landlord that is investing in this center. And therefore, the tenants in that main corridor are the first calls you make.
I got a bunch of questions now. So, all right. What held you back? Oh, maybe this is it. You didn't want to breach that fiduciary or the brokerage investor barrier. So what advice would you give? Because I'm a broker, but I've always done investments, acted as principal, never really, but I use that as I hold myself to a higher standard sort of deal when I'm talking to sellers. So what advice would you have to agents who are afraid of breaking that? Do you do it now? Are you more comfortable saying, hey, I want to buy this thing? It's a fit for me.
Yes.
Tell me how you got there.
Yes. At the time, it was very much, it's our fiduciary, right? So we have to represent that owner as broker, serving the owner's best interest. But that doesn't preclude you from having a transparent, upfront, candid conversation about your intentions. Where that gets sticky is if you brought a buyer and then you're investing in the deal and you don't tell, that's a no, you can't do that. But to say, hey, listen, we have rapport. I eat breakfast with this guy once a month for 2 years. We enjoy each other. So, that's a perfect example of someone that I should have said, hey, can I do this one? He's the type of gentleman that would have liked the whole mentor, mentee, pass it on type of thing. That's
sorry to get you going, man.
It's okay. That's good. I got a couple hours left to work and bang out some calls.
Gonna find a deal today.
So first, it was respecting those lines. And 2, my wife and I, we had not yet taken hard-earned capital out of the bank and applied it to this thing called real estate. And that in itself is a huge move. You'll hear podcasters and mentors and stuff say, just start, go try it, go do it somewhere, or big or small. And so I think at the time it was a little too big of a bite to risk. Now, in hindsight, it would have panned out. That's fine. But again, I don't think we can operate in hindsight. It could have not. And I wasn't, financially there to be able to bite it all and figure it out. So it was kind of a time and place thing. But I think the biggest was I didn't ask. And so, yes, now I ask. A lot of times I will, on the front end of a conversation, or maybe not the first stroke of the conversation, but you better believe following this podcast, you and I will focus on, okay, now that we've had these types of conversations, how about the broker arrangement? What do you need? What deals can I pump in front of you? Well, one component of that too is I love to be involved in deals, and I like to align myself with the right partners. And so, hey, if you have a short list and you think I qualify, blah, 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 let's do it. I'm less of a invest in deals with 1,000 people, and more so, I think to me, the perfect deal is a partnership of a few folks where each person adds some level of value. I love the guy that knows the capital stack and the best place to source debt. I love the guy that has the leasing and property management or let's say the construction background, a weak point for me. I've got the brokerage mindset. So the enter, exit, structuring the lease so that it's attractive to both lenders and investors in the future. So thinking long term. And now, thank God, which was part of the impetus for jumping to the ownership side, I handled leasing for 3.5 million square feet. So I have that skill set and learned and managed the construction side of it too. So I got to dip my toe on that end.
Yeah, man, I want to ask you about that. There's so many things popping up. So a minute ago, you said something, and I have to touch on this just because it's a personal thing. So like going from single family into the multifamily space and looking at how conservative I've been on my investing and how I know I can make money, getting into the multifamily space, especially in the time that I started. And, I guess the funds and syndication world, like back in 2020, terrible time to start in the multifamily space, arguably, right? A lot of headwinds coming down that I didn't foresee in the sense of pricing, right? So one thing that I've heard of, because I've talked to a lot of brokers, I've had all those conversations, underwriting a bunch of deals. And one thing that the feedback I get is like, you're underwriting too hard, right? And so you mentioned something like I was underwriting myself out of deals. So I'm sure you have clients or customers that have kind of done the same thing. So like, what is your advice to somebody getting into the new asset class, wanting to be conservative, not lose money, but like, how do you make that trade-off to getting started and getting going? I mean, I've bought some, but
I will provide an answer in the spirit of the podcast. But the real answer is, if I knew how to do that effectively, I would have a bigger portfolio and be wealthier. That is a skill set. Knowing when to stretch outside of your principle and your box, I think you have to be both extremely confident, or you have to have a level of foresight to aligning yourself with the right partner, or making a calculated decision in some way to widen that box, turn that box into a rectangle for a particular deal. I think that my takeaway from working the ownership side, it was Tolson Enterprises, the name of the company. My takeaway from Harvey Tolson was how he does not deviate. He deviates into product types and things like that, but at its core, it's like, here's the debt. If you don't have this down, even they'll always give you more. If you don't have this down and these reserves and this management, you're not cash flowing about this much, it ain't worth it. And that to me has made the deals I've missed very good therapy. It's helped me be true to sticking to guns. And so I feel okay with myself that my war chest is still a war chest and not 15 properties. We could pull 10 people on this podcast right now that will completely disagree because it's not working in capital, and I could have done 4 more deals in that time. It's absolutely true, but I'm okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, and even the gentleman I was just speaking with before this call, we were talking about goals. I think a lot of it comes down to like, what is the goal? He's later stage. They've earned a ton of money actively. And so there's like, I just want to play some capital in a few 1 to 4 properties. That's it. And I was like, do you know what syndications? Do you know about this? Do you know about that? And he's like, nah. And so, yeah, a lot of that comes down to your personal goals. And somebody may be telling you, yeah, you could do 4 more properties. A lot of those guys that just went out and bought some deals just to do deals, they're kind of in a pickle. We're proud to be sponsored by Ridgeline Investment Group. Ridgeline has a track record of transacting more than $53 million in assets throughout Texas. Ridgeline is currently looking to acquire 100 to 200 unit Class B multifamily communities between 5 and 20 million in San Antonio, Temple, Waco, Tyler, and other Texas secondary markets. To learn more about Ridgeline Investment Group, visit www.ridgelineig.com.
Some of them are 10 times wealthier than you or I, so it works, but there's plenty that are in the pickle, and I just want boatloads of cash flow to replace my wife's income, and I want to be able to know that the machine is working. And Red Rich Dad Poor Dad. We want that. That's why we're in this business. But sleeping at night is cool too.
So you got a track record of closing at about 94% of list price. So there's some negotiation strategies that you've probably come up with over time. So what are some negotiation tactics that you can attribute to your success on that high of a close rate of a list to sell?
I put a ton of emphasis on the front end with my relationship with owner and a particular deal. We will have lots of discussion. I will underwrite the crap out of a deal in a conservative manner in the way that a lender and buyer will look at a property so that the NOI that we are talking about come time for negotiation is credible, defendable, realistic. And that way we could all argue about cap rate. That's the function of risk. Okay. You're going to have a different view than I do. And you could have 10 different people with 10 different cap rates. But if we can't argue about the income, then I can take that huge piece off the table, and it minimizes the opportunity for a buyer to retrade, for a appraisal to come in completely out of whack. Now, none of us have control over those. We're managing as much as we can ahead of time to flush out the due diligence process, to flush out the unknowns during the due diligence process. That to me is a fundamental, important item. I have lost plenty of deals. 1 out of 4 and sometimes 1 out of 3. I will lose to other brokers because I've stuck to a particular thing. In that regard, you deviate sometimes. Hey, we need some pipeline here, and okay, I'll stretch on that deal. And I've been proven wrong. And I have a deal just recently where I told the owner, I can't take this at this number. It's not going to sell there, but I will take this at this number for right now. And underwriting properly is, I think, the biggest.
I think that's huge. I mean, there's a bit of financial engineering that goes on all around, right? And that is in the cap rate discussion and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, if you are doing that service and you're actually coming to market with a realistic NOI, an actual NOI that I can't dispute, then yeah, that would be huge, because I see it so often on OMs, or see it so often on something, like taxes were just left out somehow. Like, what are you doing, And so, yeah, it just waste time. You look at deals that you don't need to. So yeah, I think that's huge to have the numbers up front. So on the investing side, if you're looking at a deal and you're working with a credible broker that is putting out actual numbers, that's a huge tip, right? It's like you get to know them and how they underwrite and what they look at. That's been helpful for me.
There are brokers that I know, I'll say this in the positive light and on the negative. There are brokers in our world that I know that there is a generally accepted principle of discounting that broker's packages by X% right off the rip. And that sucks. I mean, a ton of inventory and all that's great. But how about the deals that are underwritten well that broker may take that automatically get discounted? I don't want that. There are other brokers where they fire a deal to me and it's like, I don't even have to do my homework as much. You're still looking at stuff, but I can trust that person does it the way I do it. And so, gosh, it's a time element, even just in our conversations, because I know I'm scrolling through their financials. It's like, boom, 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 boom. Okay, he's thought about, there's a reserve for the taxes that are going to potentially increase. Having the answers for all the stuff is a huge component as well.
Yeah, super helpful. All right, so that's a helpful tip for sure. Look, you've been featured in some publications. I know you do some podcasts and that sort of thing. Remember ULI? I'm also in ULI. We'll talk about some of that in just a minute. But what are some key takeaways and some lessons that you have from putting yourself out there? I guess agents and other people who are afraid of putting themselves out there, like, what do you get out of it and why do you do it? Is it a personal thing? I just like to see my face.
Well, it's quite the opposite. And I know that was a joke, but like at the same time, that isn't a lot of people's reason for not doing it, is that it seems and feels vain. I feel vain doing it. When you're walking down the street and you do the quick video, I feel like a dummy. But a few years ago, I told myself, okay, there's a lot of groups of people that are doing this, and they're doing it a lot, and they're successful. Maybe it's not, if you do this, you'll be successful, but it is being utilized as a tool to further someone in the business. Do I know particularly why? No, but can't knock it unless I do it. So I put it in my calendar. I'm huge on scheduling, segmenting everything in my Outlook calendar. I put it in my calendar a few years back, post to LinkedIn, and I did it like twice a week. And I noticed almost immediately through the forward facing events like ICSC and ULI and the other things I'm involved in, people were going, oh man, you've been getting busy. Oh man, you've been da 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 da. It's a great compliment. It feels great. I was also like, no, I've been busy. I've been doing this level of volume. So one of the things I learned, this was the clicking moment. And this sounds like rash, but it's the only way I know how to put it really, or it's the best way. People don't care, nor do they have the time to follow what you are doing. Evan Lyons, Randall, anybody else, unless you really want to learn from this person. Generally speaking, we can't just track everybody's everything. And so it is a little bit our own obligation to show someone what you're doing, tell someone what you're doing, and then take pride in some of the accomplishments. So that helped rationalize it for me. And then I ramped it up and started doing it more. And then I realized as you include others in these communications, they may like it too. What I mean by that is the seller that you sold that record cap rate in Michigan that he developed may love to be able to also say, but isn't brazen enough to put it out there, that he developed a really good Tractor Supply and Evan sold it and it was the lowest cap rate sale in the state for 5 years. That's cool. So it gives him a little, I'll be the vain fall guy to give him a little shout out as well. Mind you, he gave me the shot at the business, stroked a big check to me. So why not at least pay some homage to that quality developer? Symmetry, Frank Jarbo, there's your shout out. It's hard to measure, like calculable, is this worth the time? Dan Lukowitz in our firm is a big forward facing social media person. He's done successful podcasts himself. He's on a bunch of people's podcasts as well. You'd like him, but I'm glad I'm on yours first. He and we have sessions. We sit there with purpose and talk about what actions online we can directly connect to and draw to calculable, measurable paycheck. I'm not talking like, oh, this lead. I'm talking this turned into that. We closed it last week. And there doesn't seem like there's any one answer, but I think that there's value and importance in doing it in some capacity. We're here today as a result of that.
Oh, for sure. Personally, I love having the conversations. I love getting to know people around the country. And I mean, I say the same thing. It's a labor of love, honestly. Like I'm not getting anything out of it. I pay people to edit the show. So it's just like, but what I was going to ask you is, do you notice, one, people see what you're doing, they see your activity, but I don't know if you've worked on like personal branding or if it's just more like, this is what I do, this is what I work on. But it seems like over time, people know you, like you, trust you. They get to see your story and like what you're working on. For the longest time, I was against doing it. If you go on social media, it's 90% of it is just this podcast being posted out. It's just one of those things. So I have to get better at it. And that's kind of why I'm curious, like, have you seen a direct correlation? And there's no real straight line, but it's anecdotal evidence that it's working.
If I'm not selling 300 deals and have more money than I know what to do with and still have time to manage my family, if I'm not there yet, then I could be arguably doing more. Now, I'm not striving to I don't need to be the $10 million man and where my life is, which hard thing for all of us to work on is be happy where you are. But I think I resign myself to, as long as I designate a specific amount of time to do it, there is likely something measurable that as a collective that will come out of it. I can draw specific correlations to it. Earning respect, getting the meeting because the name recognition, firing a deal and having two brokers see it on LinkedIn and I love when freaking people unrelated to the deal will comment someone else to loop them into the deal through another service. Oh, not for me, but this guy. That's fun, quick connection that you can make. And my favorite thing is 2 seconds later, make the phone call, fire the email. Hey, listen, post this on LinkedIn. So-and-so said something. And now you already have this mutual person. Yeah, there's buy-side stuff that we've gotten out of it. You talk about labor of love. My mother was an entrepreneur in public relations. She started from the ground and built a public relations company for 30 years that she ran. And some chunk of that was based in commercial real estate. And so we were just peppered growing up on writing. I mean, I could not in 6th grade leave and turn in a paper without 4 versions of edits. And I'm not talking like your mom writes your paper. We write it. She marks it up. we sit down and she's like, here's the dictionary, here's the thesaurus. You've used this one too many times. Find me another word that fits. We don't like the structure of this. Why don't we like the structure? What should we do? Where should it be? And so word choice, selection, how we shape things, communication and language has always been something that has been innate. And it hurt along the way up. You're like, oh my God, it's one pager, blah, blah, blah. But it mattered. I respect the respect that she gave to the power of language. And then I think along the way, I observed the power of public relations. I mean, putting yourself out there, going to publications, being on the news, having at a groundbreaking, if you're a developer and this is your second deal, get the gold shovel, call a couple news people, call some locals, cut a ribbon with some cake, and make it a hubbub, make it a whole to-do. Because the townspeople are always curious and looking and matter. And that's how you can really create a name for yourself in a community. So there's some root in a sliver of what I'm doing that relates.
I've been talking to a lot of guys about, building personal brand, social media managers and that sort of thing. And one of the guys I recently spoke with, I was like, what's the ROI? Like if I start investing in this, like he's like, man, there's no way. You can't figure that out right now. And it depends on what kind of product you're selling, whatever you're doing. And so the advice that I've heard multiple times, and if you look at some very successful people, influencers didn't necessarily have a product they were selling. They just became influencers. They built the audience and then they started selling something, right? And so that's kind of the approach. It seems like it's changed quite a bit. Early business, you're like, here's my MVP, and does anybody want to buy it? Now it's like, I'm going to grow this massive audience and then I'm going to sell something to you later. So anyway.
It's a salesperson figuring out building the audience and then figuring out what the audience wants and then going and find it. You have to do that in real estate, right? I mean, if nobody wants a pharmacy, I shouldn't have a whole business plan around, only pharmacies, right? You're not going to be that successful. But I don't think that I utilize social media with that in mind first. I think it's more about making sure that people are aware of the value that I can bring their portfolios because I've built a skill set as a valuable, established individual in the commercial real estate space. So I feel confident in that. I've seen where I've helped people in various ways beyond just hi, are you buying or selling? And I want to overcome the idea that when I'm calling, it's for this hi, are you buying or selling cold call. No, I'm aware and skilled enough in this space to be able to effectively sit down and evaluate what you have, where you want to be, what's the outlier, why is that one too risky, what could we do to make this one more valuable, and have those conversations to set up long-term wealth. And I want to jam that down everybody's throat because I've seen it work.
So the way you just phrased that, it's a challenge because it is almost the rationale for me having the show is like, what's your goal and where do you want to be? And like, what are the best types of investments for you? So how did you synthesize that down into, is it a single conversation? Is it a conversation over time? Or like, what are some of the probing questions that you ask potential investors who are looking for an investment property to really get to the heart of where they're going?
For starters, I wasn't great at sports. I did a bunch of them and I was trash. Now I'm just trash at golf and I love to golf. But I can read a person in a room and that is my skill set. And so I think that first, those conversations and the evaluation of where someone at in that portfolio is an organic conversation. If someone's willing to let me in and talk about they used to do it in a business and how they got into that one we had my brother as my partner in this one and we don't love that and I hate the operations side of this and just allow us to have that type of conversation, I can generally come to the conclusion then you shouldn't own that based on this. And you shouldn't. Now, I'll ask certain specific probing questions as well, which are directed in 5 years. Do you want to be managing more? Do you want to be managing less? Do you want to be in Florida? Where's the town that you visit a lot? Would you consider owning something in that town so that you can write off certain trips or you can show your buddies that you own this shopping center? What type of benefit do you want out of real estate? Are you cash flow driven or risk averse? Or, there's like the specific stuff. But generally, if someone will let me in, we can come up with a couple deals by the end of that conversation. Or at least I can come up with deal types and a plan. And then it's about executing. all right, trash is cash deal that I let go a long time ago. I could feel that excited you as well. We're going to find one of those for you in North Carolina because your daughter is going to college there and you'd love a project while you spend 1 month this summer. I'm hunting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think anybody listening, the questions you just put out, you need to be asking yourself those questions. That really is, if you're having that conversation with your clients, then that, as an investor, those are exactly the types of things that you need to be asking yourself.
You're a credible syndicator. And so I think on one hand, I hate to minimize this, but it's not hard to go find money. But to find money with partnerships that you want to be involved in, and then two, that match with the types of deals that you're doing is, I think, the challenge. So how do you, teach me? How do you go about a selection process? Let's just come up with a scenario where you need 10 people with $100,000, but you have 20. How does that?
I would make sure that our goals are aligned 100%. Look, this investment we only have so much room. You could do it. It depends on the time, I would say as well. If it's a really hot market, it's like first in, best dressed type deal. If somebody is coming to me, friends, family, for a small, like 10-person deal, and they need no cash flow, yet this property is going to be nothing but cash flow. It's no appreciation. It's Class C area. Like, this is only going to be cash flow, guys. Then it's probably not a good investment for them. And so that having those conversations, just like you, having an open conversation about long-term goals and why they're getting into an investment in the first place is key.
And then you're putting them into a bucket for this one. I promise we'll get you on something. This one's not for you, but there's another one I'm working on, blah, blah, blah. And then they're on the short list. You
find a deal that makes sense for them. And so exactly 100%. I mean, you categorize people in your contact list so that you know what to find them. It's that North Carolina property because somebody has a daughter going there to school. So when that comes up or when you're prospecting for it, you can just plug them into it. Look, really good conversation. Evan, you have a ton of experience and information that I could continue this conversation just because I'm curious about a lot of things that we talked about. Maybe we'll come back on.
Do another one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I always like to wrap it up with a few questions just to get to know you a little bit better. So like, what's your favorite pastime not related to business?
Family is without being a cop out. I'm a new dad. I got a daughter that's almost 2. That's still new to me. And it has become the overwhelming obsession. So all the things that the old people say about how the heart grows fonder and all these different things that you can't comprehend, you can shake your head but then it hits for you, those things. That's my current speed. But what do I like to do with them? Boating is an absolute favorite. Where I live is that we had access to about 35 inland lakes within about a 5-mile radius. That's where I grew up. So it was always like, whose boat are we going on?
Yeah, no question about boating.
Yeah, exactly. That's an absolute favorite. My wife is the same way. So whether you're parking in the sand and standing there all day or cruising around, wake surfing, fishing, any of that stuff. Wife and I both love to golf with my in-laws and parents, all that, some friends. So that's a fun one.
Yeah. What are we on a handicap these days? Golf is great. Boating. So you wake surf? Did you wakeboard in the past and then you just gave it up, or you still do that a bit, or what?
So I was a board sport person my whole life. Little skater kid and snowboarding and all that. Snowboarding is the other major. I'll take a trip every year. We go weekends, things like that. They're all over. For whatever reason, never really got into wakeboarding specifically. Usually was watching my buddies once wake surfing came about, for whatever reason, I loved it. Maybe it's just a little easier on the knees or something.
That's why I asked, because you go from wakeboarding, you catch an edge and you just face plant in the water. You're like, oh goodness, that was awful. And then wake surfing, you just sink. You're like, oh, that was nice.
Well, you can still, doing a couple turns or something, you can still smack it pretty good. But I actually, my buddy and I, he's a world-renowned kiteboarder, which is like the ultimate extreme board sport. But he was on my lake as well, and he got one of those wake foils. So wake surfboard, 4-foot beam underwater with a blade or a fin on the bottom, and the foil pops up. The board is now 3-4 feet off the water and you're hovering. That is the gnarliest board sport that I have ever had. It introduces, if you think about it, any board sport that we know of is hills and left and right, these access. The foil introduces like helicopter, a whole nother dimension of what you're feeling and experiencing. And that's a trip. So we do that, but it's also way more intense.
Are you doing that behind a boat, or are you doing that because I've seen the guys pump and they get going? Which way are you doing it?
This is behind the boat surf style, wake surf style. So you're starting with the rope for like 2 seconds. You toss in the rope, and now you're surfing normally, except you're above the water. You don't feel any ripple or bump in the lake because the waves oncoming or whatever don't affect the board, which is just wild. It's wake surfing on a cloud. And then what's real crazy is next time you're on a boat, look back, there's a secondary wake back there that nobody ever really touches. You can actually drop back and play around in that space and then pump back up. It's a trip. So we've been doing that. I can't say I'm nearly as good as he. He's a freaking natural.
I was going to say, if he kiteboards, he could do it behind the kite. He could do, yeah.
So he does all that. He goes up into Alpena. I'll do the Michigan thing up here. And there's these amazing kiteboarders. I'm talking like off the wave, hit the wind, up and over piers, going 30 miles an hour.
I tried that once when I was in Aruba, and that face planted so many times trying that. Winds are world renowned down there. And so it was fun. I would definitely try it again, but it takes more than just one lesson for me to get.
Oh, yeah. It's intense for sure.
So what's the best thing you remember that's happened to you or your family in the last 60 days or so? Recent memory.
We had my family up here. My parents came up from Florida, and we had everybody together for a good long weekend. And mostly what I can think of is my daughter just coming up with words and phrases that like nobody taught her. The stuff she's bringing up and speaking is just outrageous, her age too. So without doing a baby voice, we'll save everybody that. But
no, that's awesome. It's great to see them grow up. And my daughter's very similar. She's like putting on these full by herself, coming up with her own thing, just like putting on like a little acting class. It's very funny to see them come into their personalities. So, all right. And then name one or two people who've been most influential in the way you think or your success.
The Encore partners have contributed a rewiring of my mindset years and years ago when I jumped. I always had the fire and the go get and accountability in me. But I think jumping there and seeing that they are as successful as they are, work as hard as they are, still are humble, and run a no politics shop, I think was a pretty remarkable testament to them. And so it changed the game for me. Doubled my business every year ever since. And just by kind of mirroring the basics. That's a big one. Working with Harvey Tolson at Tolson Enterprises, learned a lot. Every morning we sat there for 45 minutes talking about the business and operations and things like that. But, of course, as a guy that's learned and experienced, he drops knowledge in there. And it's funny because I didn't write these down and go, okay, this is how I am now, but I can see my lens as I look at deals for investors or for myself. I hear these not cash flow and pass, and it's like, boom, I don't even have to underwrite that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great background. So, Evan, man, again, I feel like I could talk longer and longer because we have these things, but you have your experience and your background, and we're going to have to do a follow-up because I want to talk more about some investments and that sort of thing, learn more about the retail space, but appreciate you sharing your knowledge, jumping on and talking with us today. So catch you on the next episode.
Thank you for having me.
Surprisingly, most of the agents we speak with got into real estate hoping to gain passive income and become work optional. However, only 1 in 5 ever start investing. Most are simply too afraid to start. Once you get educated by listening to this show, you'll be able to overcome that fear and become the 1 in 5 who are finding financial freedom. Don't miss a single episode. If you want to stay up to date, the best way is to make sure you're subscribed. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do it now. And we'll catch you on the next episode.